Discussions on shonen manga are often unproductive because there's no consensus on what shonen is. It can be difficult to see the thematic and narrative through lines or story beats that these series share. At first glance, it would not at all be strange to look at JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Naruto, and Death Note and be shocked to realize that these were all published in the same weekly magazine. Questions of how these stories come from the same origin and yet come out so different are bound to pop up. We propose that the reason for such similarities is due to the fact that shonen has 5 key principles that have taken root in the collective unconscious of manga writers, editors, and publishers, which in turn also affect anime. These principles form what we call the shonen aesthetic. Understanding aesthetics. In The Right Way to Make Jump, the current deputy editor-in-chief, not head editor-in-chief mind you, Adaxa, postulates that the famous motto of friendship and effort that Jump is known for doesn't actually exist in any official capacity, but rather Shonen Jump continually produces manga with these 3 pillars because they are valued. In other words, friendship, effort, and victory are just naturally occurring unconsciously. Why is this so? In a word, it is because of an appreciation for an aesthetic. The shonen aesthetic. The most important thing to do before getting into the 5 principles is to make clear the meaning of the word aesthetics and to distinguish that idea from genre and demographics. This can be more difficult than one would expect, as they have many similarities. All can be found in any medium which chooses to utilize its qualities. That includes anime, manga, video games, TV dramas, books, and so on. So how exactly do they differ? A genre is a category of literature, a way to organize and define various types of fiction. To put another way, genre, as summarized by Anis Esperarchi and Mary Jo Reith, can be seen as just the categorization of a collection of tropes. Any particular genre piece could hold any particular philosophy or theme. Demographic is similar, with the main difference being that demographic is specifically about the target audience, and not the elements of the work itself. This brings us to the aesthetics of a work. Aesthetics, in contrast to both demographics and genre, is about the underlying ideas and philosophy of a piece of art. It is primarily an exercise in preconception and cognition. Aesthetics look at the style of collective works and ask, what common messages are being conveyed here? The immediate truth we can all agree on is that shonen is, first and foremost, a demographic. The word shonen is translated to young boy or youth, and this helps establish shonen from a marketing standpoint. Through this translation, the people who like shonen and are most likely to consume it become clear. That being said, as this interview with current Vice President of Viz Media, who is partnered with Shonen Jump, states, shonen not only translates to young boy and youth, but also to pure of heart. This translation of shonen turns out to be a Buddhist term referring to true faith and right mindfulness. In other words, shonen content seems to have an unmistakable taint of Eastern philosophy about it. Therefore, we must continue the conversation and not just leave it as a discussion of mere demographics, because by doing so, we shall discover things that are of great interest to us as readers. Justification of the ascription of aesthetic quality. Why is it that the phrase the shonen formula is prevalent in the anime community, but not, say, the seinen formula? This use of phrase has led people to mistakenly refer to shonen as a type of genre, in order to rectify their feelings of being a connection between different shonen series that they can't put into words. Part of our hope is that we can replace these phrases and lines of thought, as well as the inadequate conversations that result from them. But in the words of famous YouTuber and game critic Video Game Donkey, why is my opinion more valid than this guy's? Well, first off, I actually completed the fucking game. More than just the fact that we actually have done research into this topic, unlike most others, which should hopefully be evident, it's also believed by many that a critical part of the process that is aesthetic philosophy is the establishment of credentials. From the Encyclopedia of Philosophy by Thomas Gale, the justification of ascriptions of aesthetic qualities reads as such: objective base properties justify ascriptions of aesthetic quality, and these justify overall evaluations, but there are no principles at either level. On the second level, elegance, for example, usually contributes to a positive evaluation, but prose or painting styles can be too elegant for their subject matters, lessening the overall impact of their works. In view of the lack of principles and the relativity of aesthetic qualities to different tastes, how do these justifications work? Ascriptions of aesthetic qualities are unjustified when based on inattention, bias, lack of knowledge of the formal properties of a work, or its historical context, or an unacceptable interpretation. In asserting that an object has an aesthetic quality, one makes an implicit claim that one's judgment is not based on any of these disqualifying factors. This is equivalent to the claim that a fully competent or ideal critic who shares one's taste would respond to the object in the same way, would ascribe the same property to it. Thus, the relation between objective non-aesthetic properties and aesthetic qualities is simply that the former cause competent critics with certain tastes to respond in ways expressed by ascriptions of the aesthetic quality. Again, to quote Video Game Donkey as to put all that in simple terms, the best reviews are entirely subjective, but that doesn't mean to throw objectivity out the window. You need to build your case with honest statements that even someone who disagrees with you can relate to. The constant that is agreed upon is that the critic making the aesthetic judgment must have cultivated their taste in the field to give more informed and solid claim. Without further ado, let's dive into the actual principles that make up what we call the shonen aesthetic. Number 1. The ultimate tendency and predisposition towards optimism, pathway to bliss. In this first principle, wording is everything. While the rest of the principles are fairly straightforward, this one can be described as a tendency in the works overall rather than something concrete throughout. It can, and has been toyed with at the writer's discretion for the sake of the narrative. For the most part, a shonen series is going to be uplifting, and the actions of heroes portrayed as morally good or positive. This is likely a result of most shonen embodying the hero's journey to a T, and as such, in addition to shonen's tendency to be blunt, they attempt to impart the pathway to bliss in the most forward way possible. You can also add in the fact that Japan as a culture tends to have a real do your best, ganbatte attitude in general. This isn't to say the ending of the series can't be depressing, or to say that the actions of the hero can't be portrayed as negative. In fact, some of the best moments of and commentary on shonen come from when the actions of the traditional shonen protagonist are shown in a darker light. To call something shonen in this sense is to comment on whether it challenges you to take the leap of faith or not, often with the caveat of having to look first. 2. To impart both a mentality of gratitude and respect towards the ideas of the predecessors onto the protagonist and by proxy the reader. After respect is established, instill a fire to forge your own path. Historically speaking, it is always the youth that takes the initiative to incite change. Even on a biological level, as you age, you become more set in your ways. As you do what you have always done, neurological connections become strengthened, lie a trail walked on over and over by you. A large part of shonen is about challenging institutions of power and defending your own sense of justice, as it were. Shonen recognizes and welcomes the fact that the young will always have this drive, fire, or passion to change the world they inhabit. Rather than try and snuff out fire, they seek to fan it, to motivate the youth to do their best and work with the previous generation. The old serve as fuel and accept that they shall one day fade. They plant trees whose shade they will never get to be under, because that is what was done for them. For this reason, great importance is placed on the dynamic of the student and teacher. Passion and ideals without education would only breed ignorant hotheads, so it is vital to foster a genuine respect for the ideals of the predecessor onto the protagonist and the proxy, the reader. The predecessor can be a teacher, a parent, a former friend, and even often the villains themselves, which shonen tend to humanize and show respect for by the end. In this way, that fire that is the collective spirit grows and burns brighter and warmer with each generation. 3. Teach empathy. Again, returning to the notion of Japan's collectivist nature, empathy plays a big role in the bonding and maintaining of groups and thus society. To that end, friendship ended being the first word in the motto of the single biggest name in manga, Weekly Shonen Jump, and the heart of any friendship is empathy. It is understanding each other on some level. For as long as humans have been sapiens, we have known that no man is an island, so it only makes sense that a publisher wanting to make it big would acknowledge that fact first and foremost. Psychopathic individualism is relegated to the realm of villains in shonen, and functional, rational selfishness, that being working with and understanding the needs of others, time and time again triumphs. Overwhelmingly, the message in shonen is that when we hold hands together and weather the storm of existence as one, a bright tomorrow awaits us. It's the group solidarity that many a successful new society is built on, and many an aging society loses before its collapse. Christopher Mott, Geotrickster. 4. The belief that all of these things are achievable through... One of the core principles of Shonen Jump is victory, and in shonen as well as in life, power is the key to obtaining that victory. However, it is a mistake to assume that your power is limited to your ability to execute violence or that strength, power, and authority are the same. It is important to clarify the difference before moving forward, and before any smart aleck asks, yes, we have read Foucault. A thought experiment. Is the strongest the one who punches the hardest? If the most physically fit person on this planet drank a fatal poison, they would die correct. Does that make the poisoner the strongest because they have claimed a victory over the world's most fit man? Consider the possibility of an onlooker who uses their superior instincts, observational skills, and/or knowledge of poison to detect and destroy the drink. But they're a sickly person who can easily be crushed by the now anger fit man if they don't explain themselves quickly. It might seem like a classic rock, paper, scissors, and it says something important about the nature of strength, power, and authority. Power is the capacity to do work. In other words, it is a control of a resource being a certain expression of matter and energy. Strength is the combination of will and power needed to complete a task. Authority is control over those who give you some of their power in order to benefit from yours. The fit man has the power to crush those he knows are an enemy, but without certain knowledge that power and his life can be taken. This is why knowledge is itself a form of power. It is control over data which can be used to harness more strength more effectively. By giving the sickly person authority for his expertise and keeping him safe from poison, knowledge, and thus a form of power that he does not have, they are able to increase their collective strength. What they both will is now more likely to get done. For this reason, shonen embraces diversity wholeheartedly. The quest for power is the driving force of history. Always has been, and always will be. Those who fail to realize this are not spared in the grand chess game, but rather moved and manipulated by forces which they do not understand. End of quote. Andrew Hawkins. 5. Appreciating a pure heart. I'm gonna break from the structure of this piece up to this point for a moment and get a bit personal. Anyone who knows me knows that I think Kuroko is the greatest sports anime to ever grace the earth. I mean, the manga was literally partly edited by Togashi, and it got an adaptation that made everything better. So absolutely nothing more can be done to convince me of that. Anyone who knows me will also know that while I'm very tolerant in my actions, the same is absolutely not true with my mindset. What's right is right, and if I'm convinced something is right, there is no stopping me from looking down to you to an extent if you disagree, even if I hide it. Such is my nature that I've always had strong opinions and beliefs like that, which have stayed the same for years. So when I say that I can understand and respect people who say it is Ping Pong the animation that is the greatest sports anime, this should come as an incredible surprise. I still stand by Kuroko, of course. Ping Pong's art style is something I just can't get to no matter how many times I see it in contrast with Kuroko being my absolute favorite. I enjoyed the cast of Kuroko much more on a personal level. I am biased, of course, because I read it as it was coming out in my favorite magazine with my favorite YouTuber when I was just getting into anime. Ping Pong should not even be able to compete for space in my head. And yet, there's that one scene, the scene that I will randomly think back on when I'm eating or out walking. That scene that stands out in my mind as one of the greatest in fiction, despite everything. Pico is finally playing ping pong again after his depression. It's almost like the reasons why, the reasons for the depression, the reason he got so skilled don't matter at all. All that matters is that his friend and rival need him now. What matters is that he wants to play a good game. What matters is that the hero needs to defeat another giant monster. Effort, the jump motto we haven't touched on, is itself the will part of the will and power combination that makes up strength. With friendship and effort, victory can be achieved. Empathy, trust, will, power, gratitude, hope, all of these concepts and more are contained within each of these three words. These three words define Shonen, the youth and the pure-hearted. And a pure heart is the 5 and final core principle of this wonderful aesthetic. A pure heart is the state of only desiring one thing in all of life. It's a state in which you are focused on one thing and you dedicate your life and every action to it. In this context, a pure heart having a goal and chasing a dream can almost be swapped interchangeably. While one can call pure-hearted characters all idealistic in one regard or another, it is wrong to say that they are wide-eyed. This is because there is a distinct difference between the mature and the immature. It can be easy to get lost in the natural joy of seeing children playing or a baby in a stroller, forgetting so easily that children, for all intents and purposes, are drooling psychopaths. It's not their fault, of course, and they develop empathy rather quickly, but we cannot forget it. Pure means free of extraneous and unnecessary parts. It does not mean good. Hence why there can be pure evil. Shonen is about growth, an increase in one's power, their connections, all for the sake of securing victory. It is not married to any specific idea of justice, hence its timelessness. For as the ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus once stated, there never was such a thing as absolute justice, but only agreements made in mutual dealings among men in whatever places at various times providing against infliction of suffering or harm. Remember, this all goes back to those Buddhist origins of the word. A man who conquers himself is greater than one who conquers 1,000 men in battle after all, because conquering oneself is a constant battle to stay pure. By definition, then, one cares not about the methodology used, but the results gained from it. Shigaraki Tamura and Izuku Midoriya from My Hero Academia are both pure of heart. Gon and Gyro of Hunter x Hunter are both pure of heart. Ryder and Gilgamesh from Fate Zero are both pure of heart. It's important to make this clear because there will be confusion. Morality does not matter. Ultimately, simplicity in motivations and goals does. This is why immature good can be as bad as evil, and why the more effective evil is nearly distinct from the good, at least at first. So much of the basic work of those who serve the good is merely exposing the bad for what it is. Surrounded by such madness, what is one to do to stay sane? One must become pure. Being pure is more important than being good, for the individual at least. Good depends on the views and the states of other people. It can shift, and you can be fooled to believe what is good is bad, and what is bad is good. Throughout life, humans are influenced by a great number of things. To be relentlessly about only desiring to achieve one and only one dream in life is unnatural by comparison. What is one individual's happiness compared to their obligation? What really is a society other than a gathering where dreams are treated as a passing fancy? It's all to claim to have achieved a premature Buddhahood when placed in such a state. I'll just forget about my desires, and I'll do a proper thing so that we can all be better off. The best self-interest is no self-interest. Nothing could be further. Any true Buddhist knows that. All is contradiction. Nothing is permanent. In order to truly forget yourself and lose your ego, you must remember this. To remember this, you must remember the nature of the world. Your nature. To know yourself is to forget yourself. To forget yourself is to know yourself. It must be a constant dialogue, and in order to keep having that conversation, there must be an interest in it. One that can only come from inside you. How does one remember the person while forgetting the ego? How does one know, via experience, the cycle of suffering while escaping it? In effect, how does one become meta-modern? Your ideals, what you consider perfect and most suitable, ensure that your actions will always be in line with your goal. They keep your mind on the higher conceptually while you engage materially with the lower. Ideals are a form of self-imposed perfection, and the difference between authors that understand their importance and those that do not are worlds apart in terms of thematic richness. One of the most functionally useful aspects of the pure heart from a writer's perspective is that because it only involves one central idea, it becomes very easy to make your pure-hearted character an embodiment of that idea. You can explore all aspects of that theme, filtered through the lens of that character. It's a method of heightening the effectiveness of a flat character that works naturally with the meta-modern nature of shonen. Beyond keeping you focused on your goal, ideals make you more attractive as a person as well. People naturally admire qualities they lack when seen in other people. People and characters with a solid understanding of their ideals are significantly more confident in their actions, driven to achieve their goals. Characters with ideals emit more charisma than ones who don't have them, which, pun permitted, is ideal for Shonen Jump, which seeks to have readers stick with many singular, non-franchise-based narratives over the course of years, following one character with a flat positive arc, since that's usually better than having them crow for a bit and then have people complain that they stopped growing. In the literal sense, ideals are what protect the pure-hearted from straying from their own path. But where do ideals come from? Given that they are so intertwined with the heart, are they nature or nurture? Such a question is important because it determines whether the individual is in fact the monolith. Sorry to say, but they are not. Ideals conform sharply to the shape of the heart. Man makes his own ideals, but not as he pleases. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but based on their nature. If you do not, on every occasion, refer each of your actions to the end ordained by nature, but instead stop short at something else when considering whether to go after something or avoid it, your actions will not be in keeping with the purity of heart. If one has gratitude, you'll hold on to your ideals deep in your heart. You'll protect them. You won't forget them. You won't change them. The question one must always ask themselves is this: why was the past so great? The answer will guide you to victory, whole thing. Listen well. Just as certain as we are born from the earth, so it is that we shall leave it. Either as the dead or as an immortal drifter through space. Either way, we shall go without a sword, for there is no one who can guide us through either endeavor. Regardless of that, those warriors who venture out with a pure heart, full of gratitude regardless. Those who search for victory in beautiful things. That is what Ronin are. Okay, I think that was a decent take. If Audacity is working, fuck! Did Audacity not get any of that? It better have.